Good morning.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Yeah, good.
Good.
Lovely to meet you. My name is Jonathan.
Good to meet you. Good to meet you. Where are
Are
you
we,
located?
are we the gruesome twosome on the chat for now?
I believe so, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Also, what's your kind of interest in this area?
So I'm a mental health counselor over here in the States. And I recently was involved in talking about this very subject. So that's kind of where I got roped in. How about you?
I mean, I'm a human. There is technology. It affects me. I think that's the. we all have quite a lot of expertise here, right?
Yeah. No. That's the truth of
Yeah.
the matter. We're
So
all impacted by it.
it really is. I think pretty much in a way, any average Joe on the street could talk for 2 hours on the subject of screen time and have some good things to say.
Absolutely.
I'm a doctor, so a medical doctor, but with an interest in mental health. So I think that's the kind of where it comes from, definitely.
Very nice. Where do you practice?
So I practice in Kent, in southern England. I don't know where you are at the moment. Are you in
I'm in the
England?
States.
Are you anywhere else?
I'm in Arizona of all
Okay.
places in the US, yeah.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So, worlds apart in a sense, but only geographically. Yeah. Culturally, I'm sure very, very similar.
Very similar.
Yeah, kind of Kent, in southern England, just south of London. That's where I am.
Very nice. Very nice. Are you in the hospital, or do you work in a clinic, or where do you work?
So I work in a hospital. I work on just an acute ward in a hospital. It's not a large one. It's a kind of medium-sized rural hospital providing kind of general emergency services and stuff. But in time, I plan to train as kind of a psychiatrist.
Very nice.
So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Am I right in thinking that you are into mindfulness? Is that right?
Yes, that's me.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. No, I have significant interest in this area, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say, basically.
Yeah, I'm interested in vice versa. And if ever, so I'm also in a PhD program, so I'm planning on doing some research on this topic, infusing mindfulness specifically. I'm very interested in substance use disorders. So if that ever becomes something that you become interested in and want to participate in any research with me, that would be awesome as well.
Yeah, interesting. So I have experience in substance disorders treatment. I worked in France for a couple of months in alcohol, opiate addiction clinics. So I used to have a very heavy interest in mindfulness, still do in a kind of practicing sense, but not a professional sense, I suppose. So you would want to be treating people with some substance abuse disorders with
a fusion of so I wanted to do a fusion of a specific counseling theory with mindfulness. I'm just trying to work on what's the most efficacious theory to fuse with mindfulness to treat overall substance use disorders. That part I'm still doing research on. So that's one thing I want to work on eventually in the future. The other one, I want to kind of shine a light on the treatment industry as it's viewed currently in the States specifically. Because what we're seeing is this phenomenon of profiteering off of the backs of people that are suffering. So very much. Is that happening there as well?
So I think we have a slightly different, we don't have a private healthcare system. So I think that's probably the first thing to say, that it exists. There is a small private sector within medicine and certainly within healthcare in general. But the vast majority of healthcare for serious conditions, substance disorder is actually not one of them, but for various political reasons, it's done by the NHS, which is a centralized system. So you don't pay at the point of access for the services you get. You pay your taxes, and that's a kind of, that's adjusted for your it's means tested, if you like. Right. So I think that it's probably fairer. There's probably less profiteering, but where there are humans, there is inevitably some profiteering somewhere, unfortunately. Right. So yeah, I think we often look across the pond and we feel a bit sorry for consumers, for patients, right? Not consumers, but that's what they would call them there, of healthcare. I think it's a rough deal, basically.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I actually just got off the phone last week with I met someone that works in Beijing, but originally from the States. And he was talking to me about how the privatization of insurance is actually migrating across the globe. And so they're seeing the private sector start opening up with regards to insurance. So people are paying the higher premium for this higher insurance. And then these treatment centers are then opening up over there. And that's happening in Dubai as well. So have you seen that at all with regards to?
So there is, it's long talked about that there is a slow creeping privatization of healthcare services in the UK. COVID may have reversed that trend, which is perhaps a really nice thing. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. We're just talking about nothing at all. Absolutely nothing at all. Christina, isn't it?
Yes.
Fantastic. I don't know if you've met Kapil.
No, I
haven't. No.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Are you out in the States?
Yes, unfortunately.
What time is it where you are?
It's 3 a.m.
Jesus, well done.
That is dedication.
Yeah, hence the voluminous tea. I just have to wake up a little bit here.
Fair play, Kapil. That's impressive. You've swung around to our schedule. That's very sweet of you.
No, I was jumping at this opportunity. I love this this type of talk type situation, so I'm eager about it. Yeah. What time is it there? Almost 11, right?
It's 11.
Yeah, it's a very nice hour. Not too early. Hello.
Hi. Good morning.
Hi.
Look at us, the early birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How is everyone?
Oh, very well.
Good.
So far, so good. Yep.
I'm excited for the workout.
Oh, John, are you leading the workout?
I am, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to be upfront. I'm going to be straightforward with you, Jono. I can't join you for it. I'm not going to.
That's okay. That's fine.
But feel free to shame me during the actual talk. I'm happy to take that dubious credit.
Okay. I can definitely do that.
What have you got planned?
It's just like a 45-minute, well, it's a little bit less than 45. A little legs, just a quick little body weight hit workout, I guess. It's kind of taking our reshape concept and making it at home friendly. Should be fun.
Yeah, they're burpees.
Yes.
Oh, no.
There's not many. There's really not many.
They're my least favorite, but they're good for you. They're good for you.
There's the thing that they're great, but they're definitely not my favorites either. But I do feel like there's a good benefit of them.
Yeah, we've been very lucky. We managed to get some weights after the last lockdown, which has been a huge help, because it's just like if you're only doing bodyweight stuff, it can be quite boring, I think.
I haven't managed to get a hold of weights, so I'm like, I can't wait to get back to the studio. Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you?
Good morning.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Michelle from 1Rebel. How is everyone?
Very well. How are you, Michelle?
Very good, thank you. Excited for this talk.
Yeah, good. We're just talking about the terrifying workout at the end of it, which includes burpees, I'm told.
I'm sure John will be gentle with everyone.
This is when the numbers will drop out. Like, come 12 o'clock, everyone's like, I've got stuff to do. But I find it so much harder in a lockdown. It's not so easy to get out of things because you're like, well, where else am I going to, like, I'm on this like acting course at the moment. And they ran open and they was like, does anyone need to leave? And we're like, what are we supposed to say? Like, yeah, we've got stuff to do. Like,
such a busy schedule. Hi, James.
Hello.
Oh, you're muted, James.
All doing well?
So far, so good. How about you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Hi all. Michelle, will you be recording this?
Yes, it is recording now, actually.
Okay, perfect. I will be on best behavior. How you doing, Jonathan? You well?
Yeah, very well, James. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Not too bad. Looking forward to this workshop. I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, I hope perhaps some lively debate. I think that would be
Interesting.
Great.
Yeah.
If
We haven't had much.
If people are open to it, I don't know what we'll be debating about, but we can.
Yeah. We haven't had much debate. It's I think we're up for some debate. That's a good idea. We'll see how we get on. Maybe we'll all agree.
Well, that's the worrying thing, isn't it?
Unlikely. You never know.
Yeah.
How you doing, Christina? You well?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Surviving. Hi, Kapil.
How are you?
And Michael, have we met Michael?
Hi, Michael.
I've met James before.
Yeah. Michael, you're
I've been,
calling in from... Oh, sorry. Go
Riyadh,
ahead.
Saudi Arabia.
Oh, cool.
Mike works with our Saudi clubs.
Yeah. So, you know, actually it's raining here today all of a sudden, would you believe?
How about
Yeah, I know. Very seldom.
Are you in Saudi at the minute, Mike?
Yeah, I'm in Riyadh, yeah. It's going good. We're unfortunately, they're trying to control and stop a second wave arriving here. So the gyms have been shut for about 15 days, for about 15 more days to go. But they're controlling it from a level of about 300 cases a day. So it's not exactly out of control yet. But they had it down as low as 80 cases a day. So, you know, that's why they're being very careful.
Mm.
Hi, James.
It's interesting to hear, Michael. How are the healthcare services coping over there in Saudi?
Fine. To be honest, the thing I'm finding a bit puzzling is a definite reluctance of the population to have the vaccine. They don't seem very interested.
Yeah.
And so it's very, very well structured. The testing stuff, they've got testing stuff everywhere. You can get a test in like 10 seconds if you want to. You just roll up somewhere and get tested and you get the results in the same day. You've got to have a tracking thing so they know where you are all the time, which makes a lot of sense. And but it's just people aren't signing up for the vaccine. So
yeah,
that's been a bit slow.
Well, they've managed to do the opposite of us here. We've done the vaccine right, done the test and trace wrong. So yeah. But either
Well,
one
yeah,
worked. Do it well enough.
They did well here. I mean, people here are quite used to following the rules, to be honest. So, you know, they shut the borders last year for about 6 months, which really, really got the numbers down, and opened again a little while, sort of around January time. The numbers crept up, you know, from 80 to 380 is a big jump here. And so pretty much closed down again. All the shops and stuff are open. It's cafes, restaurants, cinemas and gyms that are shut at the moment. But hopefully another 15 days we might get reopened again. So at the minute we're using our time to do lots of training in 1Rebel, working on various bits and pieces and putting as much stuff out on social media to talk to people. And it's one of the reasons we're so interested in the mindfulness stuff, to give us something to talk to people about mental health and mental fitness, because it's really, really not much of a thing here at the moment, and we really want to bring it forward.
Sounds good.
Sorry, my cat. She may make an appearance. She's quite bad on these Zoom things.
Good thing it's a cheeky wine glass there, Jonathan. I was like, it's a bit early.
Starting early, it's all vodka.
Why not? Saturday brunch style.
Actually.
Yeah. Drinking alone, that's what I'm all about.
Give it a couple more minutes, Michelle. See how we get on, and then we'll crack on. The calm before the storm. Okay, one more minute, and then we'll crack on. In fact, let's crack on now, I think. Guys, welcome to this workshop and workout with 1Rebel. We've got 4 quite literally expert panelists, which is very exciting. We have a professor, a neuroscientist, a tech reporter, and a fitness trainer. So we've got a great panel ahead. The format will be, we're going to talk for about 45 minutes. I know Jonathan already is up for some debate, Dr. Jonathan, so it will be very much an open floor. And then we'll move into the workout with Jono, who I'm sure will beast us all later. So that should be good fun. So today's thing is on screen time and managing it effectively, which is a really interesting topic. And there's no doubt with the sort of, well, COVID and the boost in remote working, it's a very apt topic to be discussing today. But just before that, I'll give you a short introduction to Minderful, and then we'll introduce the panelists. So we've partnered with 1Rebel Minderful because we're trying to sort of promote this concept of mental fitness. So mental fitness is a very simple thing. It's the practice of doing things that are good for your mind on a regular basis. And there's 3 of us who started it, and we really feel that now is the time when we're all going to look after our minds in a similar way that we look after our bodies. I myself have a diagnosis of bipolar, so I've learned over the years how to effectively manage my mind, and today we're going to be talking about managing screen time. So I'd just like to introduce the panelists, but I'll go ahead and introduce the panelists. So Kapil, why don't you start? Kapil is fantastic. He's tuned in the early hours in Arizona. He's an adjunct professor of the Grand Canyon University, a mindfulness expert, and Kapil, do welcome yourself to the floor.
Cheers. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. I yearn for this type of thing. So cheers. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. And we have Dr. Jonathan. Jonathan, do you want to give a short introduction to yourself?
Hello, everyone. Fantastic to see you all here. My name is Jonathan Iliff. I'm a practicing medical doctor, but with a particular interest in mental health. I think in a sense, I'm only an expert in this particular subject from experience and from a degree of reading. But I'm really delighted to share the floor with such a varied group of people today. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that mix is what makes the panel quite exciting. So I think we'll have some very different opinions on things. Christina, good morning. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, so I'm a technology journalist, and I've really enjoyed seeing how technology has developed and really transformed in such a short period of time, in just years. And I think because I use tech all the time, but most people do now. So I'm really interested in how our relationship with technology changes and how dependent we're becoming on it.
Great, thank you. And a man who needs no introduction, Jono, a quick intro for those who might not know you.
Hi everyone. So yeah, I'm a master trainer at 1Rebel, and my big belief is blending movement and mindfulness and wellness together. So I'm quite excited because I feel like I'm going to learn quite a bit from this panel as well.
Fantastic. And as per usual, guys, I really encourage you, if you have any questions throughout, please do ping them to Michelle, and Michelle will then fire any over at the end, and we can put those to the panel as well. So a few stats before we begin. Interestingly, we spend on average 3 hours and 23 minutes a day on our phones. We actually spend less on the weekend, which is quite interesting. We check our phone about 58 times a day. So that's just the smartphone. We haven't even mentioned the laptops, the computers, and COVID and the effect of remote working. So we'll kick things off with the first question. And Kapil, how has your relationship with your phone and screen time changed in these times of increased remote working?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I love the construct of relationship here. I can attest that my use has increased exponentially to both phone and screen time. The relationship key aspect there has definitely strengthened. I'm definitely reliant on my phone at this juncture, just because of the lax nature of working from home. There's no oversight. So I found myself, especially me being a social creature, working in the realm of treatment, especially, kind of flocking to my phone and gravitating towards it in any lull throughout the day. This is something I've been actively working upon. And I feel like all of us universally have kind of been struggling and grappling with this whole thing too. So yes, I can definitely say that my relationship with my phone and overall general screen time has increased dramatically.
Yeah, I noticed you used the word strengthen there, which is quite interesting, and whether that's strengthened in a positive way in terms of you've found a good relationship, or whether that's strengthened in terms of it's dominated you. So I think that's an interesting play. Jonathan, how about yourself? How have you found the impact of screen time, or your relationship with screen time over the pandemic? Has that affected you?
So I think I'm probably not representative. I work in a hospital on COVID wards, so I'm not working from home at all. But having said that, when I do go home in the evenings, I'm socializing less, able to get out less, and replacing that is some degree of screen time. I would like to say though, I've actually measured my screen time over the last week, just to see what actually happens. And I'm bang on average. Those stats you gave, bloody hell, they are accurate. I spend 3 hours on average a day with around 60 little opens of my phone. So you're getting something right, absolutely.
That's very interesting. Christina, would you agree with that? Are you a sort of 3-hour girl, or are you more of a 2-hour girl, or how about yourself?
I'm 5.5 actually. So
okay, interesting. As a tech reporter, I could understand. Yeah.
Yes, well, I mean, I really embrace tech, but I have noticed I use screens all the time, especially at the moment. What I would say is I think I've become more conscious of it, because when I before the pandemic, I'd say I was at work and maybe I'd check my phone quite a lot, or I'd use screens quite a lot, but it was always in a assistant way. Whereas now it's like that is the center point of my life. And I've become sort of more aware of how much I'm relying on these things, and perhaps trying to compartmentalize it a little bit more.
Yeah, I love how you're saying you sort of become conscious of it. And I think that, I mean, I personally feel that in the last 2 years, maybe we've all become way more conscious of this, like complete sort of being drawn into this screen time, and physical effects start to happen. Like I know I wake up with very dry eyes, you know, and I know I've had a bad day the day before if I'm glued to the screen and the eyes are dry in the morning. And I think the phone becoming a center point is really interesting, and it's almost becoming like a limb to us. And I think if we overuse that limb, we're going to damage ourselves. And so I think this complete extension of phone and body and mind is a very interesting thing.
There was some research that came out recently which says that we check our phones now out of habit rather than because it's a notification just popping up. And that's so true. Quite often I'll just find myself opening up my phone and I'm like, what am I, like, why am I here? I don't know why I've done this.
Yeah, I agree. I think I read somewhere where we check it for sort of 3 reasons. 1, sort of procrastination, to avoid doing things which we don't want to do. 2, boredom. And what was the 3rd? Oh, social connections. So it's all quite obvious stuff, but there is that weird sensation where you're just picking it up for the sake of picking it up. Jono, how about yourself? Interesting, as obviously as a physical fitness trainer, and the rise in remote screen time workouts. I think it'd be interesting from your perspective. How has it increased over the pandemic?
It's interesting. I just looked at my screen time now, and my average at the moment is below 3 hours, which I'm quite proud about. But I feel like at the start, like when we went to the first lockdown, going away from being busy and training a lot, my screen time went up to, I think it was about 5, 6, 7 hours, because I had nothing else to do. We were teaching online, and now that I'm finding a better habit with it, I think my moments that I'm discovering the most is where I'm using it in times that I wouldn't have normally used it. So more in the morning, more in the evening, that's really impacting my sleep. Whereas previously, when you're up at 5, you don't have time to scroll through Instagram or Twitter or check the news. You just get up and get out. Whereas now I'm finding that I'm spending like an hour in bed just being like, oh, I'm just scrolling through in this like habit. And I'm like, but I don't, because I have no reason to get up and move anywhere. So I'm finding it really interesting what has flipped in my uses.
Yeah, and I think that hour when you are scrolling, like so often, I'll be interested to hear from the others, like I don't really want to be doing that. It's sort of like a digital vortex where you get drawn in, and I'm just fascinated in why we do that. And I think that sort of one of the things we'll come on to later is hopefully we'll have some advice to share, but this allotting of time and almost going on a digital diet, that you section off these times where you can divulge in the social media or whatever it might be, I think is interesting. Anyone, any further sort of points to add to?
I just want to say also, like, because I find myself scrolling quite a lot, but I do find it can be positive too. Like, it's quite, when I finish after a really intense day in the office, especially at the moment, if I'm like reporting on COVID, and then I just come home and I look at Instagram, and it takes you to a different place, like you just detach completely. And I think as long as you're aware of sort of how much time you're spending on it and why you're doing that, then I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. There's 2 points you raised there. There's sort of this idea of positive scrolling, which I find is really interesting. And I think there's a movement towards that with people unfollowing certain influencers or whatever that might be. And that's something certainly from Minderful and the concept of mental fitness. We have this vision of a feed of just stuff which is good for your mind. And I think that's really interesting. The second point you raised is this lag that one has with Instagram, for example, where they've done research that for the first sort of 30 minutes, say, I don't know the exact timing, you are happy on Instagram, and then after that moment, you drop off, which I find interesting.
I think there's a thing about everything is good up to a point, in moderation, right? So I think that with technologies, historically, humans have ended up regulating them, and they regulated them in 2 ways. One, in legal ways, in terms of like hardcore drugs and things like that. The other thing is in cultural ways. And I think that, this is a new technology which is really attractive, that we want more of, and we have not yet begun to culturally regulate it. And conversations like this are part of that kind of worldwide process of understanding what's appropriate, what's moderation, what's good for us and what's bad for us.
Yeah, and that regulation is, smoking in the 30s was seen as a good thing, and obviously that's a huge crackdown on that for obvious reasons, and potentially, and we'll come on to sort of future generations later, but in 50 years time there might be adverts suggesting an hour a day type stuff. Kapil, from a sort of mindfulness perspective, and how would you say, do you feel there's a correlation between your mental health and how much time you spend on your phone, or do you think that's added to the increase sort of, well, almost a pandemic also of mental health issues?
Yeah, it's a great question. As a mindfulness practitioner, I definitely can attest that there's a strong correlation between the amount of time I personally spend on my phone and my deterioration in mental health. Unfortunately, here in the States, 2020 has taught us a lot of life lessons with regards to pretty much everything that the world has kind of seen. So I personally have gone through bouts of anxiety, paranoia, fear, dread, fatigue, like emotional fatigue and almost apathy at this juncture, just with the ripple effect of everything. So I think, there's definitely a strong correlation between the amount of time that we're like finding ourselves doom scrolling and the amount of overall mental health deterioration that we're experiencing. I do think the opposite is also true. Christina brought that great point up about if you are filtering what you're looking at, you can absolutely have a positive, productive, overall positive mood thereafter. But again, it comes back to that time interval and what is the appropriate time interval for interacting with these specific tools before we drop off and start finding ourselves comparing, contrasting, and falling into this negative space.
Yeah, it's so true. And Jonathan, I know you deal with sort of quite sort of serious mental illness, I imagine, with your patients. Have you seen a link at all, or maybe perhaps not with serious mental illness, but just in general within the medical sphere? Have you seen a relationship between the two?
So I think perhaps this isn't the right time to talk about it, but I think it's certainly what's really interesting from the medical perspective is that we do not talk about this thing. We do not talk about it enough. As doctors in every sphere, from mental health to physical health, screen time is associated with sedentary behavior as well as all kinds of cognitive deficits. And it's also, of course, associated with mental illness for more obvious reasons. It's very closely correlated with ADHD at every age group, whether you are young, old, it does not matter, and severe mental illness. And, most concerningly, of all the most serious complications, including suicide, is dramatically increased by significant increases in screen time. But so what makes me really interested in this is that, this is something we're not doing. And, we're in some senses supposed to be the experts in what's good for your health and what's not. And I have never had a conversation with someone who was severely mentally unwell, who didn't have ADHD, about screen time.
Yeah, that is very interesting. So the medical profession need to sort of adopt more strategies around this and do more research and find that link. Yeah,
absolutely. And consider, ask the questions about, how is this impacting in your life? We talk endlessly about exercise, about substance use, about social networks for the right reasons. We don't talk about technology nearly enough.
Yeah, that's interesting. Christina, would you agree with that in terms of your sort of tech reporting? Is that a movement shifting towards that? It'd be interesting from a sort of like a journalistic point of view,
Yeah, I mean, I cover stories all the time that is new research into screen time and how it affects our mental health. And there seems to be a link, but the research is nowhere near broad enough or conclusive enough or has been done like for a long enough time. And so it's just really, you can say, okay, this one study says that, people experience symptoms of depression and they had heavy social media use, but we don't know if it's caused by it. So I think what's really hard when I'm reporting on these is like, you can see that there are people are using social media a lot and people are feeling, having poor mental health, but until that research is done, and like you said, until the medical community starts speaking about it more, then it's going to be very hard to prove that, there's a causation relation. I don't know how you say it, but but one of sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. I just thought, as some vaguely a representative of the medical community, good to jump in here. And this is a really interesting conversation. I think you're absolutely right. What we have is we cannot be sure at this point of cause and effect between these two things, between screen time and the outcomes that are very clearly associated. The association is undeniable between these two things. What we have is a smoking gun. But that's all we have. We don't know that there's a trigger pull or anything like that. But I think we have to take that very, very seriously and, do more research and so on. Absolutely. But a smoking gun is also, it's quite indicative. It kind of suggests the gun was fired and that someone, there might be harm as a result. So, yeah.
And also one of the things which Kapil was mentioning earlier has come up quite a lot in that as much as there is that relationship, people, especially teenagers, turn to social media for community, for like comfort. And when they are experiencing mental health problems, or maybe just insecurities, they quite often don't feel like they have a physical support network around them. And so that they use the internet and social media to find their community. Now, sometimes that can be dangerous, but sometimes that can be really positive too. So I think we just need to remember that as well.
Yeah. And from a physical side of things, Jonathan, do you find that there's been an uptake in people participating in physical fitness for their mental health, and perhaps that's also correlated to the fact that they're just swamped in screen time and they feel they have to get to the gym essentially? Do you feel people are sort of saying that, or people?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was interesting just hearing Christina talk about the like community, and I was thinking back to like the first lockdown, the community that we had on social when it came to like posting about your 5K runs when everyone was doing that, posting about, there was more of like a community buzz about doing things at home or finding something other equipment to use at home if you don't have a dumbbell. Whereas I feel that maybe has dragged off because we've come in and out so many times that now it's getting a little bit tiresome, that you don't see that same community. If anything, I see more comparison. And thinking even like just being on Zoom, I'm like the whole time when we have now, we see ourselves in a meeting where normally you would never see yourself, or same in a workout, you're now seeing yourself on your Zoom. So how do you find other ways of maybe turning off your self video? Or I'm finding a lot of my Zooms now, a lot of people turn their videos off, which makes it hard for me as a coach. I now can't coach you. But at the same time, it's like, of course, I don't want anyone to see what I look like anymore. Like we're now in this point where that community element is kind of gone, or where it was hyped through tech. I feel like it maybe is disintegrating. There is that buzz just to get back into the gym or back into another routine that isn't consumed by screen time.
Yeah, and Kapil, what's the community vibe been like out in the States? Have people sort of come together? Did you find for the first lockdown, or what's going on over there?
It's been a mess. It's just been an overall mess. I mean, people are doing whatever they want to do. You know, not to knock on the States, but I'm knocking on the States, but like, you know, it's individuals aren't willing to follow orders or direction with regards to simple wearing a mask, because it impinges on people's freedoms and all this good stuff. So it's just been an absolute horrible experience, honestly. You know, I have kids and I always worry about them catching something from someone else that's not following the rules. And yeah, I don't know, it's just not been fun. But I mean, I think it's impacting my mental health with regards to all of that. I think it's impacting everything with regards to how we're living and everything. So yeah, it's just not been orderly.
But I think digital community is a fascinating thought. And from our side of things with Mindful, we started this just before lockdown, the first lockdown. And my colleague who I work with every day, who is fantastic and brilliant, Lauren, I've only met her twice. And so, yet we've been able to, you know, build this vision. And I think it's interesting, this idea of, I feel I know Lauren very well, but I know a sort of digital image of her very well. And how powerful do you feel a digital community can be? Like, do you feel we're now connecting now in ways in which humans should connect, or are we missing out on certain elements? Anyone got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's, I work with a psychologist that's currently doing research on this vacant space that these sort of platforms create. So in the realm of counseling, we thrive off of that emotive connective experience face to face. And 70% of our communication is done through nonverbals. But this vacant space that these specific devices like Zoom are creating, we need to start analyzing what's really happening there, because our cognitive distortion with regards to that space creates that disconnect. So we need to really start looking at that, because I think it's going to have ramifications down the line.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And actually, that sort of leads us on to another question, actually. And I see here that Diane has kindly commented that she works as an ADHD nurse and also talks regularly with patients and kids about the impact of tech. So thanks, Diane. And if anyone does have any questions, do ping them over, because you know, there's a lot to talk about in this respect. But going on to the younger generations, guys, which we've touched upon, I know screen time for kids in America, a study from Cambridge Open Engage found that they doubled their screen time during the pandemic. And indeed, out of the 3,000 Iowa state university staff, faculty and students, screen time went up 20 or 30% during the pandemic. But to go back to the children's, do we have a responsibility for younger generations? Are there things we can implement now? Do you feel we've learned enough? Do we know enough that we can put strategies in place to avoid, my niece who's 5 years old, that the thought of her, having a suffering on through screen time and social media really, impacts me. And I'd be interested to see what you feel. Jono, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we definitely have a responsibility. I think there's an interesting, like my niece too, and she already knows like movements without ever being taught it. She knows to swipe. She knows the things that, like, I think when I first got a phone and I was texting like with my thumb, now we text with like our fingers. It's like the habit of, it's a new thing that's kind of driving that isn't even taught. So I think we do hold a responsibility, in particular, on how we teach using it, and not just being something that is followed. I think is important.
Yeah, Christine, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, of sort of younger generations. Again, is that talked about in media circles, or?
I think the difficulty is we maybe missed the boat a little bit, in that like all these things came out, and as we know now, governments across the world are trying to regulate big tech, and I think that even filters down to the younger generations. They've grown up with this. Their parents or carers or whoever might not have understood it, or understood how to limit it, or understood the effects of it, and now it's too late. You've grown up with it, you're dependent on it, all your friends use it, and I just think it's really difficult if you are a parent to now take back control of that, and to do that in a way that's creating a positive relationship with technology that the child or the teenager is not going to push back on.
And perhaps it's the generation beneath them. I'm not sure what that generation is yet, the unborns, who are actually, the generation, is it Z or whichever one it is, has sort of has had the suffering, and hopefully they will then impart their wisdom onto their children.
I wonder whether younger generations who have grown up with it perhaps will be more conscious with it, and that might be quite optimistic, but maybe if you've grown up with something and it's not as sort of revolutionary and all-encompassing, then maybe you'll be able to limit your time better. I don't know.
But that said, we hark back to that initial point, and I think there's a movement towards tech is fantastic. Look what we're doing now. There's no doubt about that, and let's just maximize that tool, and perhaps we'll just get better and better at finding the right things to engage with, and as a result sort of blossom as a human species. I think that's an interesting thought. Jonathan, younger generations, have you got a big plan in place?
Yeah, I'd echo that, what you just said, that I think that technology will enable, digital natives, if you like we cannot imagine. And I think that's a really exciting thought for posterity. Having said that, at the same time, the horse has bolted, but we need to try and get some kind of control, especially for the very young. I think this is, the one place where medical doctors would wade in here and say you need to be really careful is, people under the age of 3 in particular. And I would encourage it for older people as well. But, we know that with increased screen time, decreased reading time, things like this, and all of the other activities which are displaced by screen time, we see changes in the brain that from a very early age, decreases in kind of connectivity between different nodes in the brain. And we should be very wary about this. Tech can activate our minds and our brains in really wonderful ways, and there's great studies and data on this as well. But in the very young, we need to be wary of them missing out on very particular, very crucial skills. In particular, we talked about social cues, the non-verbals. These are the things that we learn in a very intense and powerful way in the first years of our life. So I would encourage that, the thought that, especially with your littlest ones, take very great care and think about that bolting horse.
Yeah, and I think sort of the so much talk about the schools being closed during COVID for those young children to have those social interactions. I think it's all pretty clear that needs to happen. I mean, you mentioned then also activities that have been displaced, which, and again, drawing back to Mindful and our vision, from my side of things, I spend a lot of time going inwards, having suffered with bipolar for 15 years, trying to find answers. And I found when I started to do things, whether it was just make my bed, tidy my room, whatever it might be, when I got out of my head, I felt better. And so we strongly are trying to promote a proactive approach to one's mental fitness, and not the single-minded apps which are out there at the moment, which is just, meditation focused, which no doubt is fantastic, but we need this broad approach. And Kapil, I know that's how I think you came across our Instagram feed almost a year ago now, and that's something which you really related to.
%, absolutely. I think mindfulness is a cornerstone with overall mental health and mental fitness, definitely. As it applies to our younger generation for this question, I've noticed from a clinical standpoint that there's this, with the increase in onslaught of all this tech-heavy information, there's ever-present connection. And so what I'm seeing is this paradoxical phenomenon that the younger generation emotively uses that kind of as an excuse to emotively disconnect. I don't know if it's an excuse, that might be the bad word, but there's this paradoxical phenomenon with ease of access and distance of emotive connection. So going back to what Dr. Jonathan even said, I mean, I think it's definitely our responsibility to overcompensate, maybe even overextend, to be able to formulate some sort of emotional connection with that younger generation. The onus definitely falls on us.
Yeah. And that sort of leads on in a way to, how do we see our relationship with screen time in 5 years' time? Say, let's put a sort of a hypothetical 5 years' time. Do you think there'll be government regulation? Like, how strict do you think it'll become? Or do you think just by the nature of the game, we'll start to evolve and adapt, and just by the physical impact it has on us? And John, it'd be interesting to hear your views on that, that actually just out of desperation, we're like, no, I've got to put my phone away now. I'm going to almost go on like a digital diet. I think that's an interesting concept. And Christina, just in terms of, again, you've mentioned you did some recent articles on tech to get off tech, and it'd be interesting to see what sort of movements happening there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a real conversation that's going on at the moment, is obviously with things like 5G and developments in VR and AR, tech is going to consume everything, and it's going to be part of our culture, part of our daily lives. And I think some people really want to move away from it, and they really want to find technology that helps them do that. Now, some people, it's like, okay, I just won't use social media until the evening or something like that. But for people who need a little bit of extra help, there are phones you can get now, which are really pared down. They just give you phone call messages and alarms. And so you could just have that for the weekend, or you could have that all the time if you wanted. And that way, you're not tempted to use your smartphone for other means. And there's all sorts of programs where you can check your screen time, limit it after, say, an hour on a certain website. What I find quite useful is I do a thing called the Pomodoro Method, which is where you spend 25 minutes on one task, and that can be screen time or not screen time. And then after that, you get a 5-minute break. And I find that's just really good for breaking up and making you aware of how much time you're spending on things. And you can go back to it, spend another 25 minutes on it, or you can move on to a different task.
Yeah, I love that idea of like it's a sort of a weekday phone and a weekend phone. Like, I find that fascinating, and I think I could totally see that happening, actually. Jono? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No,
I was just going to say, like, I think it's something that some people do instinctively anyway, if they go on holiday or if they go on a weekend away. I know I try to just put my phone in another room and forget about it.
Yeah.
So it's just an extension of that, I think. And yeah, Dr. Jonathan probably knows more about the effects of that, maybe.
So I just wanted to say, I think it's fascinating that the tech guru here is the one who is putting away her phone on the weekends, and I think that says something about us being aware of the technology we're using, and as we become more like Christina, in a sense, more expert at our technology, we may, in a cultural sense, get used to putting stuff on away. And I really think the key here is that it is cultural regulation. I don't think that kind of legal regulation is the solution to all of this that you were mentioning, James. I think that us, getting used to being experts in tech means being experts in how to use tech safely as well. And that's our future, I think.
I want to echo in on that and say I believe it's about educating control back. The same way you would look at, from a fitness point of view, if you look at any substance that kind of deviates away from your goal, it's putting control back. So putting, I have my phone on Do Not Disturb all the time. So I'm never, if you've got to call me, you've got to call me at least 2 times so it's important. No one calls me anyway, but at least so it's important. Or putting control back on, like in that weekend, having the weekday and the weekend one, putting your emails on out of office for the weekend. Why not? So you don't get a notification. And from a fitness point of view, what I think tech is doing great in is is being able to put control for an individual on their own fitness. So now, like on my Apple Watch, I know it's controversial and can be debated a lot about your calories, and I don't like calories. But even my stand time, like things like that, there's little things that make me put control back on what I'm doing with it and how I'm using it, because it is an extra tool. It's not in control of me. And it's putting that control and being responsible back, which I think comes from educating.
Yeah. And I think, which leads me on to quite a challenge. Like, I know from a personal side of things, I'm trying to sort of promote my art at the moment. And so working on the weekend, I have to digitally put that out into the ether. And so I'm finding myself on weekends, because I want to pursue another passion or project or hobby, I'm having to find time on the weekend for screen time, which just depletes me for Monday. So I'm finding a strange scenario at the moment. And I think and to that point, I mean, not necessarily to that point, but Kapil, like, questions just come in. Do you think the social media companies have a responsibility, these big tech giants? Kapil, any thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think either that has to be done in a form of psychoeducation so that people are aware of what it is that they're actually engaging with. Maybe even a routine for weaning off of specific things, or creating an app or some sort of, I don't know what to call it, device to be able to wean oneself off of whatever it is that they created. But it definitely falls on them. That would be the moral thing to do, you know?
Yeah. The next, I suppose, I'm just aware of time, and we've got about five or 6 minutes left, which is great. And I think I'd encourage anyone who's listening to perhaps, well, I'm going to say, I think what would be great now is to share some advice. So, you know, any tips that we all have to sort of end on, which, you know, from a personal side of things, how we can sort of support each other in managing that screen time. So, firstly, I'll put it to the panel, but if anyone in the audience has any sort of little tips and tricks that they do, please do share, because it'd be interesting to know. I've got a few written down myself. Guys, anyone got any tips which we could offer to people as we sort of draw this to a close?
I mean, I'll certainly jump in and say the most important one first, that is, it's about cutting down in the right places, and just the hour before bed, just, you know, that's your time. If you're going to cut screen time from any time at all, then, and if it's only the last 20 minutes before bed, do that. But this is the most powerful, this is the most leverage we get in this conversation.
Yeah, that's interesting. So scientifically, that's sort of proven then, John, Dr. John, in a way that the mind can settle earlier and therefore a better night's sleep, and I imagine all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's actually about predominantly melatonin, which is one of the chemicals that slowly builds up. It's kind of released from our biological clock, something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and basically it suppresses that. And then the sleep it takes longer for us to get to sleep, so less sleep, and it's less restorative. And it's really quite straightforward that if you want to attack one particular place and get the most gain, that's where I would begin, definitely.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's a lazy. I sort of know that, but I never do it. So I need to implement that. Jono, any thought of any advice? I mean, perhaps from a physical side, like obviously we're sitting down all day in front of a screen. Like any advice you'd like to offer people?
Yeah, I kind of want to echo it off Jonathan as well, and saying, like, noticing what you're doing, if it is in the evening, that it is like a hard thing to do. So if you're noticing that you're scrolling or reading on your phone, then pick up a book. I notice sometimes if I'm in a state on Instagram comparing myself, then I'll be like, okay, there's something going up here, I'm going to journal. Or if it's at a point where I'm going to put it down for that 20 minutes before, I'm going to stretch. I'm going to do something because I'm sitting hunched, and particularly I think stretching before you go to bed, breathing before you go to bed, doing little other things, that noticing what it is that is consuming your time on your screen time, and then replacing it with something you can do in real life. My big things for me is that I keep my notifications off, and I think the next biggest advice I would give, particularly coming out of lockdown, is being aware of when we're back in interface environments, where your attention is. Does it lie with the tech that's in your hand, or does it lie with the person that's in front of you?
Yeah, I love that attention. That attention where it is. And I know my dad, and I think it does span generations, he's now checking his phone. He was very anti-smartphones. He's now checking his phone, at the table during, and we always joke, like, what? And he always tries to find an excuse why he's checking it, but he's being sucked in as well, which so it spans all generations.
That's something really positive, is to not be afraid of calling someone out. I think we don't need to be necessarily polite in acknowledging that someone's at a table with their phone all the time. My dad's the same, but we call him out, and he now is in the habit when he's around us to know that that's not okay.
Yeah.
Because what we do find, as soon as one person does, and all of a sudden everyone else starts to do it as well, and then you look around, you're like, I'm the only one that's not on my phone. So it's like, don't be afraid to call someone out, to be like, you're on your phone too much. I don't think, particularly coming out of this when we haven't been in a social interaction, we're going to be that picky to be like, oh, but I need to check my Instagram followers.
Yeah. I think sort of little rules like not at the table or something, it sounds a bit sort of official, but I think little tips like that can help. And Christina, any thoughts? Or
just to build on that, I would say, you know, only use your tech and your phone if you're actually using it. Like, don't, if you're out on a walk, put it away. You don't need it unless you're going to look for directions, unless you're going to change your music or call someone. And the same, you know, if you're cooking, only look at it if you're looking up a recipe. Why else? Like, focus on the exact task that you're doing, and only use the technology if it's helping you do that task, I'd say.
And then focusing on the task in hand, Kapil, that leads nicely to mindfulness. And any thoughts?
That was my answer. Just basically have awareness of, I'm echoing everything that everyone else has said pretty much, but having that awareness is kind of the first step. Secondly, being able to hold yourself accountable for what it is that you're breaching. If you're setting these specific guidelines up for yourself, stick to them. Because you're going to find your overall mental fitness is going to impact so much more greatly the next day. So sticking to that regimen, and, you know, if you need secondary, tertiary applications to download to your phone, they're there. These tools and resources are absolutely there to help you wean yourself away from this specific type of device, and they translate to every single type of device. So definitely use those as tools to help you, you know, in your overall mental fitness.
Yeah. And I think I've just seen a note here from Diane. It's interesting that she feels, with regards to the children, it's about education, you know, educating the parents. And I think that's happening in a way, isn't it? The education is happening. I think that is, we're in the flow, you know, we're in the current stage of that. So I think that's interesting. Any further thoughts or topics we'd like? I mean, have we had enough debate, Dr. Jonathan?
Okay, so I'll try and throw a spanner in this nicely agreed works that we've all come up with. And just to say, well, hang on, we've talked only about decreasing screen time, right? But would we ever want to increase screen time? Could that be a good thing? And I would use the example of Jono and James's parents as an example of this, where I can't speak to social media, but certainly there is good data, good evidence, both neuroimaging data and kind of health outcomes data, that if you're an older person, using the internet, using technology, using social media is great for a whole range of things, from the connectivity of your brain, you know, which networks are engaged and stuff, right through to other things like depression, loneliness, health outcome parameters of all kinds. So, you know, it's in a way, it's horses for courses, and it's not just a one-way street here.
Yeah, I love that, and it reminds me actually that my grandfather at the age of 95 bought himself an iPhone so he could keep up to date with the grandchildren, you know. So I think that's lovely, and I do think that's a very interesting point you raised, which I certainly overlooked during this.
I actually have to agree with you on that one as well, not debate you. But it's like, for me, when I'm away from home, I'm from New Zealand, so the only way I can connect with my parents is via FaceTime. Instead of my niece. My niece now knows who I am. Whereas if these 2 years we didn't have FaceTime, she would have no idea who I am. So it's these things that actually are helping. And actually they're in Melbourne, so when they do walk past 1Rebel Australia, they see me on the outside and she's like, oh, it's Donna. Like, she now can recognize me. And I think for my parents, it's how they connect with us and they know what's going on. And we can do group family calls. It's like these little things I think are so important in connection that are definitely still valuable.
Well, guys, oh, sorry, Christina, go.
No, I was just going to say, and also you have to remember, not just chatting to people you know, but learning things like languages you can now do through your phone. You can find all these amazing workouts. You can do lots of different things, which, especially in a pandemic, we can't go to the places we would normally do that. So you can find all of that online now, which I do think is quite amazing. Yeah.
Well, guys, I'm going to draw it to a close. I think we all deserve a round of applause for managing our own tech responsibly and tuning into such a great session and learning how to use it responsibly, and also as Christina just said, we have access to amazing workouts, and that leads me on nicely to Jono to lead the amazing workout. But Kapil, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can go back and get a bit more kip now over in the States. But whatever you do, don't check your phone before nodding off for your second sleep. Dr. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. I apologize, I'm not joining you for the workout. Jono has promised to tease me endlessly as a result, and I perfectly respect that. I've got unfortunately another tech Zoom call to tune into, so I will leave you for now.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Jonathan. And Christina, thank you so much for joining us as well. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, guys, thank you so much. We hope to have more of these in the future, covering different topics of mental fitness. We've covered a few before this, so keep stay in touch, and we'll be doing more of these in the future. Cool. Okay, any questions for anyone? No, we all good? Great. Okay, thanks, guys.
So Tim, will take like 2 minutes to get yourself a little bit more next time. You need to transfer rooms as well. To get yourself all set up. You don't need any equipment today, so just body weight style, just a mat if you've got a mat. Just make sure your surface isn't slippy. But take like 2 minutes to get set up. I'm just going to move rooms, and I will rejoin you in a second.